I served my cheating husband divorce papers at his proposal to my sister. My marriage was a perfect lie, and I was the one about to tear it all down. My name is Olivia, and I am 32 years old. The first 5 years of my marriage to Nathan were a curated masterpiece, the kind you see in glossy magazines or on perfectly filtered social media feeds. Our home, a beautifully restored craftsman on a quiet, tree-lined street, was always filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the soft glow of morning light. Nathan, with his easy smile and successful career as an architect, was the embodiment of a loving partner. He'd leave a single wildflower on the kitchen counter some mornings, a small, perfect gesture that always made my heart swell. We hosted dinner parties, our friends laughing around our reclaimed wood dining table, commenting on what a power couple we were. And in the center of it all, woven into the fabric of our happiness, was my younger sister, Sophia. She was my best friend, my confidant, the maid of honor at our wedding. She was the little sister I'd protected and cherished, and she adored Nathan, hanging on his every word, always eager to help us with weekend projects or just come over for a movie night. Our lives were an intricate, beautiful tapestry, and every thread seemed perfectly placed. I was, in every sense of the word, blissfully unaware. The first crack in this pristine facade appeared on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, and Nathan had left his laptop open on the kitchen island after a hurried breakfast. My own computer was updating, so I casually opened his to look up a recipe I'd mentioned to him. As the browser loaded, his email client was open behind it. I didn't mean to snoop, I swear I didn't, but a subject line caught my eye. An email from a jeweler with the subject, "Final confirmation for Sophia's ring." My blood ran cold. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, the warm, safe kitchen suddenly feeling alien and hostile. I clicked on it with a trembling hand, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Inside was not just a confirmation, but a detailed exchange. Nathan had designed a custom engagement ring, a 2-carat oval diamond on a rose gold pavé band. It was the exact style Sophia had once pointed out in a magazine, sighing and saying it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. I remembered the day clearly. We were at a cafe, and Nathan had been with us. He'd smiled and told her she had excellent taste. I thought he was just being a kind, doting brother-in-law. I scrolled further down, my nausea growing with every line. There were emails back and forth about the timing, about the proposal. Nathan had planned it all. He was going to propose to her on their anniversary. Their anniversary. I didn't even know they had one. I closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the silent room. The world outside the window went on as normal, neighbors walking their dogs, a mail truck rumbling down the street, but my world had just stopped. The wildflower on the counter, the one he'd left that morning, now looked like a cheap, wilted apology. Every memory, every shared laugh, every tender touch over the past few months replayed in my mind with a horrifying new context. The late nights he said were for work, the guys' trips that Sophia had coincidentally also been out of town for, the secret smiles I'd mistaken between them for sibling affection. It was all a lie, a meticulously constructed, monstrous lie. I sank into a kitchen chair, the wood cold against my skin. The tears didn't come. There was only a vast, hollow emptiness, a chilling clarity that settled deep in my bones. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was erasing me, replacing me with my own sister in the life we had built together. And the most terrifying part of it all was the realization that as my world was ending, theirs was just about to begin. I had a choice. I could fall apart or I could fight. And as I sat there in the ruins of my perfect life, a different kind of feeling began to stir in the emptiness. It wasn't sadness, it was rage, cold, hard, and sharp. And it was the most focused I had ever felt in my entire life. The initial shock gave way to a chilling, methodical calm. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside me, turning off the grieving wife and turning on a strategic commander. For the next 48 hours, I became an expert in the life of a man I thought I knew. I played my part flawlessly. When Nathan came home that evening, I greeted him with a kiss and asked about his day, my voice steady, my smile unwavering. I watched him, this stranger I had shared a bed with for 5 years, and saw the performance in his own eyes. He was a good actor, but so was I now. While he slept, I began my excavation. His phone was my first target, but it was locked, a fortress. I didn't need it. His laptop was a treasure trove. I spent hours in the dead of night, the screen's glow illuminating my face, sifting through his digital life. I found the hidden folder, cloud-synced and cleverly disguised as work projects. It was a chronicle of their betrayal. There were hundreds of photos of them together, stolen moments on beaches, in cozy restaurants, holding hands in places he'd told me he was alone. Each picture was a dagger, but I didn't flinch. I saved them all to an encrypted drive. I found the credit card statements. The charge for the ring, over $20,000, was listed under a generic vendor name. But there were other charges too. Hotel rooms in cities he'd claimed to be visiting for conferences, expensive dinners for two, a deposit on a luxury apartment downtown, a place I'd never heard of. He was using our joint finances, our future, to fund his new life with my sister. The most painful discovery was a shared journal app they used. It was a sickeningly sweet collection of their innermost thoughts, their plans for a future without me. Nathan wrote about how he'd fallen out of love with me, how I'd become predictable, how Sophia made him feel alive again. Sophia, my own flesh and blood, wrote about her guilt, but how their love was faded and too powerful to deny. She wrote about how she couldn't wait to finally have the life she deserved with the man she was always meant to be with. That's when the last piece of my old self died. By the end of the week, I had a mountain of evidence, photos, receipts, financial records, and their own words. But I needed more. I needed an army. I made a single, discreet phone call to a high-profile divorce lawyer, a woman known for her ruthless efficiency in high-stakes cases. I didn't use my name. I laid out the situation, the evidence I had. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. When I finally gave my name, she let out a low whistle. She agreed to see me immediately. In her sterile downtown office, I laid out my digital evidence. She listened, her expression unreadable, her fingers steepled under her chin. When I was finished, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered a battle plan. We would file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, which in our state had significant implications. We would seek a full forensic accounting of our finances. We would use the evidence to not only ensure I received everything I was entitled to, but to demonstrate his egregious breach of trust, potentially invalidating any claims he might have. I left her office with a retainer agreement and a sense of power I hadn't felt in weeks. I was no longer a victim. I was a plaintiff. I was the one holding all the cards. The final step was to play my part, to lull them into a false sense of security. I started being more attentive, more loving. I'd cook his favorite meals, buy him the expensive whiskey he liked, and tell him how much I loved him. I even started suggesting he spend more time with Sophia, saying how important it was for him to have a good relationship with my family. The look of relief on his face was almost comical. He thought he had gotten away with it. He thought I was his clueless, doting wife. And then, a week later, he took the bait. He came to me, a nervous, excited energy radiating from him, and told me he had a very special, important family dinner planned for the following Friday night. He wanted to celebrate our amazing family, he said. He even asked me to help him pick out a new tie for the occasion. I just smiled and agreed, my heart a cold, steady drum in my chest. The stage was set. He had written the script, but I was the one who would be directing the final scene. The day of the dinner arrived with a deceptively beautiful sunrise. I woke up before my alarm, the quiet of the house a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I went through the motions of my morning routine with a surreal sense of detachment. I applied my makeup with precision, the careful sweep of mascara and the perfect blend of foundation feeling like war paint. I chose my dress with the same care a general would choose their armor, a sleek, elegant navy sheath that was both understated and powerful. It was the dress I wore to our 5th anniversary dinner. The irony was not lost on me. Throughout the day, I sent Nathan cheerful texts, telling him how excited I was for our special night. He replied with equal enthusiasm, his messages filled with love hearts and exclamation points. It was a grotesque charade, and I was playing my role to perfection. I wanted him to believe, right up until the very last second, that he had won. Sophia called me in the afternoon, her voice bubbly and a little too high-pitched. She wanted to know if she should bring anything, if her dress was okay. I assured her she looked beautiful in anything and that I couldn't wait for our family night. The lie tasted like poison in my mouth, but I swallowed it down. I needed her there, comfortable and unsuspecting. I needed her to be standing right next to him when the world came crashing down. The restaurant was our favorite, an intimate Italian place with dim lighting, checkered tablecloths, and the owner who always greeted us with a kiss on both cheeks. Nathan had reserved the private wine cellar, a romantic, secluded room hidden behind a heavy wooden door. As we walked in, I saw the setup and had to suppress a bitter laugh. He had outdone himself. There were candles everywhere, their flames dancing and casting long shadows on the stone walls. A small table was set for 3, covered in a white linen cloth and adorned with a single perfect red rose. He had even arranged for our favorite violinist to play softly in the corner. It was the perfect stage for a proposal, just not the one he was expecting. We sat down, the atmosphere thick with a tension only I could truly feel. Nathan was jittery, knocking over his water glass and then laughing it off with a nervousness he tried to pass as excitement. Sophia was glowing, her eyes sparkling as she looked at Nathan, a secret smile playing on her lips. I watched them, the 2 people I had loved most in the world, and felt nothing but a cold, clear purpose. I played the part of the adoring wife, laughing at Nathan's jokes, complimenting Sophia on her new haircut, and toasting to our wonderful family. I even raised my glass and told Nathan that I was the luckiest woman in the world to be married to such a good, honest man. The look of pure, unadulterated guilt that flashed across his face was so brief I almost missed it, but I saw it, and it was glorious. The meal progressed, each course a step closer to the edge. I ate my food, sipped my wine, and made small talk, all while mentally rehearsing the plan. My lawyer and her assistant were waiting in a car around the corner. My phone was in my purse, set to silent but with a specific number on speed dial. The evidence was all there, backed up on a cloud server and a flash drive tucked safely in my bra. I was a walking, talking time bomb, and my timer was about to go off. As the violinist began to play a soft, romantic melody, Nathan pushed his chair back from the table. His hands were shaking as he wiped his sweaty palms on his trousers. He looked at Sophia, his eyes filled with a love that was supposed to be mine, and took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. My heart wasn't pounding with fear or sadness anymore. It was beating with the steady, powerful rhythm of a drum leading an army into battle. He was about to give a performance, but so was I. And my finale was going to be one for the history books. The air in the small, candlelit room grew thick with anticipation. Nathan stood, his gaze locked on Sophia, a look of what he believed was profound love etched on his face. To anyone else, it would have been a picture-perfect romantic moment. To me, it was the final act in a tragedy of his own making. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with rehearsed surprise. The violinist swelled the music to a crescendo, a dramatic soundtrack for the ultimate betrayal. I sat perfectly still, a serene smile fixed on my face, the calm eye of the hurricane about to make landfall. Nathan began to speak, his voice thick with emotion. He talked about finding a love he never thought possible, a connection that transcended time and circumstance. He spoke of a soulmate, a person who made him feel whole. Every word was a knife twisting in my heart. But I didn't bleed. I just watched, absorbing the details, the sheer audacity of it all. He was using lines he had once said to me, recycling our sacred vows for my sister. Then he dropped to one knee. The movement was clumsy, his knee hitting the stone floor with a dull thud. He reached into his jacket pocket, his fumbling fingers finally closing around a small velvet box. The room was silent, except for the soaring violin and Sophia's soft, dramatic gasps. He opened the box, and the diamond I had seen only in a confirmation email flashed in the candlelight. It was even more stunning, more brilliant than I had imagined. A 2-carat oval diamond on a rose gold pavé band. It was the ring of my sister's dreams, purchased with the money from my own marriage. "Sophia," Nathan began, his voice cracking. "From the moment I truly saw you, I knew my life would never be the same. You are my best friend, my soul, my everything. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He held out the ring, his hand trembling. A single perfect tear rolled down Sophia's cheek. She opened her mouth, the word yes forming on her lips. It was the precise moment I had been waiting for. Before she could utter the syllable that would seal their pact, I raised my hand, a simple, elegant gesture that cut through the romantic haze like a shard of glass. The music stopped abruptly. Both of their heads snapped toward me, their faces a mixture of confusion and annoyance at the interruption. My smile never wavered. I slowly stood up, smoothing down the front of my navy dress. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. I didn't look at Nathan. I didn't look at Sophia. I looked at the empty chair between them as I spoke, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of an avalanche. "Before we celebrate this momentous occasion," I said, my tone dangerously calm, "I think there's some business we need to attend to." I walked around the table, my heels clicking softly on the stone floor. I stopped in front of Nathan, still on one knee with the ring held out. I placed the envelope on the table in front of him, right next to the red rose. "Nathan, these are for you." He stared at the envelope, his brow furrowed in genuine bewilderment. "Olivia, what is this? Can't you see I'm busy?" His arrogance was astounding. I turned my attention to Sophia, whose face was now pale with dawning horror. "And Sophia, my dear sister," I said, my voice dripping with a sweetness that was pure venom. "Don't worry, I didn't forget you." I reached back into my purse and pulled out a stack of photos, held together with a paperclip. I fanned them out on the table between them. Pictures of them on the beach, in hotel rooms, kissing in his car, evidence of their secret life. The color drained from their faces. Nathan slowly rose to his feet, the velvet box slipping from his grasp and clattering onto the table, the ring spinning like a top. "Olivia, I can explain," he stammered, his confident facade crumbling into dust. "There's no need," I said, turning and walking toward the heavy wooden door of the wine cellar. I opened it, and standing in the hallway were two sharply dressed individuals, my lawyer and her assistant. They walked into the room, their presence immediately shifting the dynamic from a romantic proposal to a corporate takeover. My lawyer stepped forward, extending a hand toward Nathan. "Nathan," she said, her voice all business, "I'm Olivia's counsel. The envelope on the table contains a petition for dissolution of marriage, citing irreconcilable differences stemming from your egregious and well-documented adultery." She then gestured to the photos. "And those, along with a significant amount of digital and financial evidence, will be used to ensure that Olivia walks away with every single asset she is entitled to. We'll be in touch." The room was deathly silent. Nathan looked from the lawyer to me, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. Sophia was sobbing quietly, her perfect proposal moment shattered into a million pieces. I stood at the door, my lawyer beside me, and looked at the wreckage of the life I had once known. But there was one final, devastating blow to deliver. I hadn't just come here to end my marriage, I had come to burn their entire world to the ground. The silence in the room was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. Nathan stood frozen, his mouth agape, his eyes darting between me, my lawyer, and the damning evidence scattered across the table like confetti at a funeral. Sophia had collapsed into a heap of dramatic sobs, her perfect proposal moment now a public humiliation. The violinist, sensing he was no longer needed, had quietly packed up his instrument and slipped out, leaving us to our private apocalypse. My lawyer, a woman who clearly relished her work, took a step forward, her heels clicking with authority. She picked up the velvet box containing the ring and examined it with a critical eye. "A beautiful piece," she noted, her voice devoid of emotion. "We'll be adding this to the list of marital assets to be liquidated." It was, after all, purchased with marital funds. Nathan's face went from pale to a sickly green. "No," he choked out, finally finding his voice. That's mine. I bought it for her." My lawyer gave him a pitying look. "You bought it with money from a joint investment account, one that was seeded by an inheritance from Olivia's grandmother. An inheritance, I might add, that is legally her separate property. So, technically, you used her money to buy a ring for her sister. It's a fascinating detail the judge will enjoy." She let that sink in before continuing. "But the ring is just the beginning." She nodded to her assistant, who handed her a thin tablet. With a few taps, she projected a screen onto the bare stone wall of the wine cellar. It was a spreadsheet, a meticulously detailed financial log. "This is a preliminary forensic analysis of your accounts over the last 18 months, my lawyer explained, addressing a now terrified Nathan. "We've been tracking the flow of money. The $30,000 for the deposit on the downtown apartment, the $15,000 for furniture, which, according to receipts, was spent on a weekend trip to Napa for two. The $5,000 a month for a consulting firm that, as it turns out, is a shell corporation registered to a post office box. A post office box, I assume, you share with your new business partner, Sophia." I watched as the full weight of his financial ruin crashed down on him. He hadn't just been cheating, he had been embezzling from our marriage, from me, to build a new life. He thought he was being clever, hiding the transactions in layers of plausible deniability. But he hadn't counted on me. He hadn't counted on the quiet wife in the background turning into a forensic accountant with a vendetta. Sophia's sobs had quieted to whimpers. She looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with a new kind of fear. "The apartment?" she whispered, looking at Nathan. "You told me you paid for it with your bonus." I almost laughed. Of course he did. He had lied to her, too. He had built his new castle on a foundation of deceit for everyone involved. "Oh, we haven't even gotten to the best part," my lawyer said, a grim smile touching her lips. She swiped to the next screen on the tablet. It was a series of scanned documents. "Nathan, you remember when you convinced Olivia to transfer her portfolio into your management? You told her you could get better returns, that you'd take care of everything for the woman you loved?" Nathan just stared, speechless. Well, my lawyer continued, it seems you've been quite the active manager. You've been siphoning off small amounts for months, consolidating them into that offshore account we found. But the real prize was the sale of her startup stock, the one her father gave her, the one that was explicitly in a trust. You forged her signature on the transfer authorization and sold the entire stake for $2 million. That money is gone, transferred out of the country. The room spun. I knew he was bad, but I hadn't realized he was a full-blown criminal. My lawyer had uncovered a level of betrayal I couldn't have fathomed. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. This was about criminal prosecution. Nathan sank into his chair, all the fight drained out of him. He looked broken, defeated. Sophia stared at him, not with love, but with the dawning horror of a woman who realized she had tied her wagon to a sinking ship. My lawyer gave me a nod. Her part was done. She had delivered the killing blow. I looked at the two of them, sitting in the ruins of their grand romance. The man who had promised to love me forever, and the sister who had promised to always have my back. I felt a strange sense of peace. It was over. I turned and walked out of the wine cellar, not looking back. I didn't need to see them anymore. Their faces were burned into my memory. I walked through the now empty restaurant, the owner giving me a look of profound sympathy. I stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring around me. I had won. I had destroyed them. But as I stood there on the sidewalk, alone in the aftermath of my own victory, I realized the battle was over, but the war for my own life was just beginning. I had torn down their world, but now I had to figure out how to build my own from the rubble. The drive home that night was a blur. The city lights streaked across my windshield, a kaleidoscope of a world that was moving on while mine felt frozen in time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove, the silence in the car a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. When I walked into my house, the first thing I noticed was the single wildflower on the kitchen counter, the one Nathan had left that morning. I walked over, picked it up, and tossed it in the trash. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. It was the first act of taking back my space. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional excavation. My lawyer was a force of nature, dismantling Nathan's financial schemes with surgical precision. The divorce was swift and brutal. The evidence was insurmountable. Nathan was not only left with nothing, but he was also facing potential criminal charges for the forged signature and the stolen $2 million. Sophia, once the papers were filed and her name was dragged through the mud, disappeared. She sent a single pathetic text message begging for my forgiveness, but I blocked her number without a second thought. Forgiveness was not on the table. Justice was. The hardest part was telling my parents. I sat them down in their living room, the same room where I told them I was marrying Nathan, where Sophia and I had opened Christmas presents since we were children. I laid out the story, calm and factual, just as I had with my lawyer. My mother cried, her heart breaking for me and for the loss of the family she thought she had. My father, a quiet, stoic man, just listened, his face growing harder with every word. When I was finished, he didn't say a word. He just got up, walked over to his liquor cabinet, and poured me a glass of his finest whiskey. Then he poured one for himself. He raised his glass to me. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice thick with emotion. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone. 6 months later, my life was unrecognizable. Nathan was gone, his belongings cleared out, his presence erased from the house. The downtown apartment was gone, repossessed by the bank. The last I heard, he was living with his parents, his reputation in tatters, his career in architecture effectively over. No one would hire a man with a fraud charge hanging over his head. As for Sophia, she had moved to a different state, shamed and ostracized by a community that had once adored her. I sold the Craftsman house. It held too many memories, both good and bad. I bought a modern loft downtown, a space with clean lines, high ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the rooms with light. It was my space, built for me and me alone. I used a portion of my recovered inheritance to start a small consulting firm, helping other women navigate the financial and legal complexities of divorce. It was my way of turning my pain into purpose. One evening, I was standing on my balcony, a glass of wine in my hand, looking out at the city skyline. It was the same view I had on that terrible night, but it looked different now. It didn't look like a blur of chaos. It looked like a sea of possibilities. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. It was a picture of him and my mother at a beach, smiling, their faces sun-kissed and happy. The caption read, "So proud of the woman you've become." I smiled, a genuine, deep-in-my-soul smile. The betrayal had nearly broken me. It had shattered the person I used to be. But in the process, it had forged someone new. Someone stronger, more resilient, and fiercely independent. I had served my cheating husband divorce papers at his proposal to my sister, and in doing so, I had served myself a new life. A life that wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was mine, and it was just the beginning. They tried to bury me in a lie, not realizing I was the seed of my own rebirth.